Humanity faces many problems: war, environmental destruction, endless division, corruption. Existing societal institutions have not been able to solve these problems. There's long been a hope that people with scientific, rational, and progressive mindsets would be able to get together and create a good society. But this has not happened. Our society is not healthy, despite being better in many ways than the societies that came before it. This might sound like a cliché point or an ungrateful critique, but it's really an important thing to say. People living in a confused and incoherent society often become confused and incoherent themselves, and in turn they contribute to making society even more incoherent. Take the United Nations as an example. It's an organization that exists to address and solve global issues, yet its very name is a contradiction. You cannot unite nations that are separative by their very nature. The whole principle is wrong. Nationality is a divisive illusion that breeds conflict, separation, and violence by conditioning people to identify with arbitrary borders instead of recognizing their shared humanity. People reference the wars that have been fought in the name of religion, but if they understood the harm and wars that dividing the planet into nations has caused, they would be looking for a very different approach for organizing humanity geographically. While having the United Nations is likely better than not having it, it has not lived up to its mission of the betterment of humanity. And people are trying to solve the problems that humanity has created. There are attempts to do this in a variety of ways, through science and technology, including AI, through nonprofits and think tanks, diplomacy and global cooperation, education, environmental conservation, economic and social reform, activism and grassroots movements. We could keep adding things to this list. And there has been successful and impactful treaties and agreements, green and civil rights movements, environmental protocols, and technological developments, like the internet and the open access to knowledge that it provides. And humans will continue to innovate and address societal issues. But what if we have missed the root cause of the problems of humanity? What if all our solutions fall short? What if all human-created problems share a common source? Despite our achievements and successes, the world is a dangerous place where our technology has exceeded our rationality. We have built the means to end human civilization and potentially even all life on this planet. Right now, there are more than 110 armed conflicts going on the planet, and this appears to be trending upward. It's exceedingly rare we hear anyone speak about ending all wars anymore. We have tensions between nations that hold nuclear weapons. We have vast inequality and exploitation going on that humans continue to do to each other. And we have divided from each other so many different ways, and the quality of communication going on between people who hold different views and values has been breaking down for quite a while now. You just need to turn on a TV anywhere and see two people on a show where they disagree with each other. They're usually shouting over each other, insulting each other. They're not listening or understanding each other. And who knows what the future holds for AI and bioweapons. And we can spend all day talking about what's actually taking place in the world and all the different problems. And we probably will have a different video specifically about what the human-created problems are. But for now, I'm going to leave it to the viewer to look for themselves to see what's going on in the world. What we are proposing is that human-made problems are not being addressed at their source. And we're saying that the source is in thought. If we don't address these problems at the source, they will never get resolved. Thought has many positive aspects that are very familiar to us, but almost no one points to us the incoherence and harm that thought creates. It's not just that thought can go wrong, as we've all experienced. These massive human-created problems like wars and destroying the environment or dividing humanity from itself, all of these are only possible because we don't see or understand what thought is really doing. And make no mistake, because of what thought is doing in the world, human culture is not coherent, and that incoherence has been there apparently since the start. But in the past, our population was smaller and our technology was more limited, less harmful. So the harm that we could do was more contained. That's clearly not the case presently. The point is, we really need to see that thought is at the source of the world's problems, of humanity's problems. And this sounds foreign at first. It also goes against the stream of our culture, which praises thought and its achievements. But this problem with thought is more insidious and troubling than it first appears. We don't actually see what thought is doing. Thought presents an image to us that's just telling us how things are, and it's not affecting or participating in the things it's reporting on. Nothing could be further from the truth. This capacity to perceive the activity of thought was referred to as proprioception of thought by the late scientist David Bohm. Heikki Peltola, hopefully I said his name right, referred to this as thought sense, a less formal term that we very much like. Our bodies have proprioception and we're aware of the movements of our own body, but it's not like that with thought. We're only vaguely aware of the process of thought that is taking place inside and outside of us. I say outside of us because thought, language, these are collectively, socially generated things. And now I'd like to give a concrete example, even though it's an innocuous one. It's a more simple one. Problem was people wanted to improve traffic, so they built highways to make travel faster. But this encouraged more car use, leading to worse traffic. And then the solution they implemented subsequent to that was to build even more highways. So they were thinking one way, they implemented that thinking, it didn't work. When they tried to fix it, they kept thinking the same way. They call this induced demand. It's kind of funny where your very attempt to solve the problem in this particular context ended up making it worse. And they've done interesting studies where, cities that build more roads, highways, sometimes fare equally or even worse than cities that don't. So it's okay that we get things wrong as humanity. We always have the opportunity to observe and improve. But the point is, quite often we have this approach to things. We're thinking about things one way. Thus our actions flow from that way of thinking. Then when problems arise, we continue to use the same way of thinking to address the problem. The obvious solution is either to cease the wrong kind of thinking or correct the wrong kind of thinking. But often we aren't able to see that thought is creating the problems. In this somewhat trivial example I gave you of, highway congestion, road congestion, it's very easy to see how modifying our thinking, changing our approach significantly could solve this problem. But in the case of wars or environmental destruction or any of those big human-created issues, there's a lot of steps from our thinking to the time that actually leads to wars, and it's very hard for us to connect it back. But this is the point we're making. People aren't seeing that these human-created problems are resulting fundamentally from our thinking. Our actions are born of our thinking. They're only possible because we're thinking a certain way. And if we don't address that thinking, how are we ever going to address the real problem? Of course, when a war is actually going on and happening, by that point you obviously have concerns for your immediate safety and how to end that war. That's not the right time or place to be focusing on the fact that this was a result fundamentally of human thought. But when you're not in a war, which thankfully the majority of people are not the majority of the time, this is when we need to be giving attention to this. This is kind of the main point. We don't see what thought is doing. If we saw all that and saw how it goes wrong, then we wouldn't be creating all of these problems all the time. So what are we talking about here? Why does CogSci Labs exist, and what is it trying to do? We have this very basic proposal. Something is going wrong in human culture. It's not coherent. This is creating all kinds of problems now, and it can lead to even worse problems for all human civilization later, because of the ever-increasing power of our technology. So first we must give attention to what thought and language are actually doing. We must give attention to thought as a process. Everything we're talking about depends on this. Ideally, we'd have a large number of practitioners attempting this, and reporting back their findings to a centralized international place. One could imagine the activity of the practitioners in a few different ways. Perhaps like in the Buddhist model, there's a place like a monastery where people go to give their full attention to the process of thought. But that does seem a bit isolated from the whole of life. Is that isolation needed? I don't know. Another model would be having the practitioners gather in similar areas at differing major cities on the planet. There may be a necessity to doing this together in person. There may be a benefit of a kind of shared learning that makes this process easier for all. You can imagine someone trying to learn the martial arts. They could be at home watching videos practicing on their own, but if they went to a center that had many martial art masters, direct one-to-one or group training, you would expect them to do much better and learn faster in that second environment. We will take what we can get though, even if that's only individuals who come to this path on their own and are in connection with each other virtually. We have to start somewhere. If one was to say that meditation holds a great promise to the benefit of humanity, then we would need to start by having meditators, people who actually meditate. Here we're saying advanced metacognition holds a great promise to produce a good society and coherent culture. We're not promising or guaranteeing that this is the case. We're only saying that it makes sense to make a serious effort and inquiry in this direction to see what is possible. So if for meditation you need meditators, for our field, advanced metacognition, you need people who are seriously engaging in metacognitive processes. This is a much wider scope than meditation, but it includes meditation. And the main thing we're talking about is direct perceptual awareness, to the degree that is possible, of the process of thought. But there may be adjacent metacognitive activities that support this overall goal also. So this is the first point we're trying to make. We must make clear what advanced metacognitive processes are, and we must have people engaging in the activity itself. Next, we must have an international body where people can report their findings, collaborate, and support each other. For this, there is the Advanced Metacognition Working Group, which will be publicly launching later this year. And the activity that is going on, we must document it, we must record it, we must study it, we must evaluate it, and we must interface with scientists. Our proposals need to be evaluated scientifically. Well, an argument has been made historically that what goes on in the mind is a black box that we cannot see inside of. That does not mean it cannot be studied. If we take the example of meditation that was given earlier, you'll see there's actually a large body of research on the subject going back many decades. And so we must push forward this field of advanced metacognition. There are a lot of other things I could talk about. The need for outreach, the need for getting this proposal that thought is at the source of humanity's problems into the cultural landscape, and we need to do a better job of clarifying what actually the advanced metacognitive practices are, how one can engage in them, and how we can tell if metacognition is actually taking place. We need to create living examples of people actually getting together locally and producing different kinds of activity from what is going on in the common culture. That is, people need to get together and do these metacognitive practices both individually and together so we can see what's possible. We also need to better evaluate existing approaches and research on the subject, as it's entirely possible someone made findings of value that we're not aware of. And there must be a way to amplify thought that makes its activity and faults more obvious. Many scientific discoveries benefited from developing experimental conditions that amplified or made certain effects more obvious and manifest. We need to do the same here with thought. There's an opportunity here to leverage recent developments in AI to augment and audit thought in real time. There's a lot of work to do. And very importantly, we must connect and work with scientists and put forward our proposals scientifically so they can all be evaluated using that methodology. Our culture has become a culture of science, and it's very important that science is aware of what we're proposing and actually beginning to study any examples we're able to produce of it. For this to spread, it must enter the culture of science. Even though having practitioners is the most fundamental thing, at some stage it's very important that we interface with science. So this is going to conclude the first video. I just wanted to give everyone a general overview and rundown of why CogSci Labs exists, what we're trying to do, the kind of space we're going to explore. But I'll be producing videos on an ongoing basis, inviting you into these explorations and inviting people in to assist, volunteer, or produce their own results and findings in this very important field.